Raise your hand if there's a child in your life who you love. I see a lot of hands. Now, would you raise your hand if there's a digital citizen in your life who you love? Not so many. And I think I know why. Digital citizenship is a fairly abstract subject. It's all up in our minds, right? Whereas the word child goes right to our hearts. And that's the point. We need to keep the heart, the human part, the citizens in our policymaking about digital citizenship. And there's a reason for this. Approximately 1 in 3 of all internet users in the world are under the age of 18. So we need to get this right. We need to be thinking about the perspective of the digital citizens. What do they think? What are their experiences? We need to get it right because digital citizenship comes from a dark place where I come from. And I'll explain that in a minute. But first, let's just look at what it is. Now, Wikipedia has a very, very simple definition. It's just utilizing IT to engage in society and government and politics. That works pretty well. But it's only half of the latest definition that comes out of the United States from some of the most prominent researchers in the youth online risk field at the University of New Hampshire. It's a simple 2-part definition, and they said that we need to keep it simple. Online respect, which enables the second part, right? Online civic engagement. They suggested that we keep it apart from digital literacy, which is often what's equated with digital citizenship. It's very important, but it's not enough. And that we ground it in youth citizenship, a long-time movement that is about serving interests larger than ourselves. So, do the young citizens buy this definition? We don't know yet. There is really no consensus about what this thing is. I think maybe here in Europe, the term netizenship is fairly widely used, and it probably has a definition. There maybe is some consensus around it, but not in the whole world. We decided to actually test the idea on young digital citizens at 4 internet governance forums from 2010 to 2014, some colleagues and I. We had very lively discussions. They got livelier as the forums progressed. They were in Vilnius, Nairobi, Baku, and finally Istanbul in 2014. So we had young people from all over the world, many countries. Some of them were sort of intrigued. Others had never even heard of it, especially those in East Asia, hadn't come up yet. And some were quite skeptical, actually. Is this yet another thing, yet another interesting concept or term that adults are imposing on them? Kind of like internet safety. So let's think about this for a moment. I've been following this subject, youth online risk, safety, citizenship, and all the components of it for almost 20 years. I started writing about it in the late 90s, and fairly soon was participating in forums on the subject. I've served on 3 national task forces in the US, and we did some really great work. We consolidated the research, put it out there, but you know what? It got drowned out. It got drowned out by a lot of fear. There were public awareness campaigns that were trying to scare parents and children. There was an awful lot of fear and panic in the news media. And I think maybe we were not alone. I think there's a lot of fear messaging about youth digital media use in many countries. And I think we have to be really careful about this because young people want to get as far away as possible from scared, controlling adults, right? Developmentally, they are designed to do risk assessment, to develop their resilience, to explore identity, and to figure out their position in the world, who they are, because they're growing up. So it's really best, we're finding, to maintain as strong ties of communication with our young people rather than to shut things down, because there are a lot of workarounds that they can develop these days, whether it's at a friend's house or at a public Wi-Fi connection or at school and in their hands on a mobile phone. So it's very important that we get this right. Now, I told you that I've been following this for almost 20 years as a journalist, and journalists are not sources. My sources are researchers, and I am so thankful for their fine work that in North America goes back to the year 2000. And I'm not going to cite a lot of research for you, but I am going to just give you 3 research milestones in my experience. First of all, I'm very, very grateful for the work of the Harvard School of Education's Good Play Project. It was part of an overall umbrella called the Good Project that looked into digital ethics in young people starting about a decade ago, qualitative research. They spoke with young people from ages 15 to 25 at length to find out what their experiences were online. And there was a theme that ran through what they heard from those young people. They heard many, many times that when something bad happened online, they had no idea what to do. They would ignore it and move on. There was a kind of learned helplessness. That's not good. So the next very representative piece of research that I'm very thankful for came from the very famous EU Kids Online project. The EU Kids Online project is based in London and did amazing research in more than 25 countries over multiple years. And they talked with young people from all those countries from ages 9 through 16. And round about 2013, they came out with a paper called In Their Own Words. They had found that adult concerns and fears had shaped the public policy agenda about youth online risk, not children's own concerns, interests, and experiences. So they asked open-ended questions of young people. Questions like, do you think there are things online that bother children your age? 55% said yes, a little over half. Then they got more personal. They asked, are there things online that bother you? Interestingly, only 12% said yes. I found that notable. Another question they asked was, what sorts of things? And there were so many I can't possibly tell you tonight, so I suggest that you read the paper. So that was very revealing for me to read and to write about. And then finally, the term juvenoia. Have you ever heard it? It was coined by the director of the Crimes Against Children Research Center in the United States. He was the lead author on the very first youth online risk study that came out in 2000. Fast forward 10 years, and Dr. Finkelhor had coined this term, juvenoia, which he said means the exaggerated fear of the influence of social change on young people, including technology. And he brought out in that paper and in a talk almost more than a dozen social problem indicators involving young people. And this wasn't his data. This was federal data from multiple studies, and it was about everything from substance abuse to depression, suicidal thoughts, school violence, child sexual abuse, and on and on. And the amazing thing is that from about 1985, when the World Wide Web first got its start at a consumer level, widely used in the United States, from 1985 until, actually that was before the World Wide Web. The first browser came out in 1993. I remember when the New York Times broke that story. So since the beginning of the internet in the US, all the way through, at that time, 2010, I think it was, all those social problem numbers were down. All of them. The only two that were up in the United States were the level of obesity and the number of children living under the poverty line. So all of those other problems that concern us all a great deal were down over a period of about 15 years. Just think about that. Dr. Finkelhor wasn't saying that the internet has lessened risk in children's lives, but he was saying that the internet has not increased children's risk across all those indicators. Something to think about. So what do we do about all this? I'm not going to just leave you there. I have some suggestions, 5 actually. I think of them as pillars of intelligent policymaking around digital citizenship to make it useful and engaging for young people. First of all, make sure it's citizen-sourced. I'm sure you've heard the term crowdsourced, right? Well, citizenship can't be dictated from the top down. That's not citizenship. It needs to be from the bottom up and lateral and inside out, right? We don't impose reality on the citizens and decide what's right for them. I think we need their input. Second pillar, 3 literacies. So in this digital age, we're talking about very social media, right? Very social digital media. So 3 literacies are needed. One, of course, is digital literacy, very important. But we all, regardless of age, have a tsunami, a fire hose of information coming at us 24/7 all the time, right? We need media literacy more than we ever have. We need those critical thinking skills, and we need to help our children develop them. And that 3rd literacy is social literacy. In Europe, I think it's called social competency. Some people call it emotional intelligence. But there are skills, actual skills, that we can teach children in order to be able to function effectively in digital as well as physical environments, at home and school and everywhere else. And those skills include self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, relationship skills, and responsible decision-making. Those are empowering tools. There is also peer-reviewed research that shows that social literacy increases academic success. So it's not just social success, it's life success. These are the literacies, these are life literacies. Practice is kind of obvious, right? Citizenship is a verb. Citizenship needs practice. You can't learn to swim when there's no water. It's very hard to develop digital literacy outside of digital environments. So we need to get digital environments into school. We need to practice our digital literacy at home, in communities of guided practice with citizens of all ages. Rights. We are in the home of the UN Committee on the Rights of the Child, the global framework for children's rights. We can't forget that there are 3 kinds of rights in that convention. We know about the rights of protection. We're working hard on that. A lot of great work by law enforcement, civil society, and the public sector is going on to protect the rights of children and to protect children. There are 2 other kinds. Provision is, those literacies I was just speaking of. It's education. It's the skills of effective functioning in digital environments. And then finally, rights of participation. These 3 Ps of the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child are like a 3-legged stool. It simply cannot stand without all 3 legs. And rights of participation, association, conscience, and expression are just as important. If we cannot exercise our rights of participation, how can we function as citizens? Finally, agency. Agency, we think of it as kind of a government thing, a government agency or a UN agency. But agency is empowering. It's the freedom and capacity to act, to make change. Children are stakeholders. They're not just potential victims as we have represented them for so long in internet safety. They are stakeholders in their own well-being and that of their peers and their communities, online and offline. They protect each other. We've seen lots of evidence of this. They deserve more credit than we give them, I think. So let's give them, allow them that agency online as well as offline. A young man, a millennial, a member of the millennial generation who's a published author, Nathan Schneider, was recently interviewed on national radio in the United States. And the last question the interviewer asked Nathan was, what gives you despair and what gives you hope? Nathan said that what gives him despair is a lack of agency when people feel there was nothing they could do. What gave him hope was the opposite. But I'm going to read you what he said because he said it better than I ever could. He said, for me, the experiences of hope are the stories where people are living that agency and building the kinds of communities we need to resist the injustices in our world. I hope, he wrote, we can learn to see that dignity that's in all of us. Find our agency, our ability to make changes. So parents, educators, policymakers, can we change the rhetoric? Can we help our young people find their dignity, their agency and leadership? Can we help them be the change that they want to see in the world? My hope is that we can keep the heart, the citizens, in digital citizenship. Thank you.